Fox News Deck.
Good Tuesday afternoon to you and yours. And first from the Fox News Deck this afternoon, Islamic State terrorists have apparently chopped off the head of an American journalist named Steven Sotloff. That's according to the SITE intelligence group, which tracks terrorists online. The organization reports the Islamic State released another video, one very similar to the one that showed the beheading of American James Foley. This new video shows a masked terrorist, knife in hand, standing next to Steven Sotloff. It ends with a gruesome shot of Sotloff's body. The terrorist, with a British accent yet again, claims to be the same militant from the James Foley video. In that video, the militants had threatened to kill Sotloff if the United States did not stop attacking Islamic State targets in Iraq. U.S. officials say airstrikes against militant targets in Iraq have continued. Just last week, Steven Sotloff's mother released an emotional video pleading with the leader of the Islamic State to free her son.
Steven has no control over the actions of the U.S. government. He's an innocent journalist.
A spokesman for his family is saying now that the family is aware of the video to please give them peace while they grieve. Sotloff was a freelance journalist who had worked overtime for Time magazine and other media outlets. He was covering the crisis in Syria outside Aleppo when he went missing in August of last year. U.S. officials say they're trying to confirm definitively whether this execution video is authentic, but at this point, there's no reason to believe it is not. Our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, as she mentioned in the last hour, has watched it and is in Washington. Catherine, to you.
Well, Shepard, the video is just under 3 minutes in length, and it really is a carbon copy of the execution video for journalist James Foley. It begins with a title, A Second Message to America, the first, the execution of Foley, and then it goes to video of the president announcing the airstrikes in Iraq from a press conference in Martha's Vineyard, and then you go to this shot, which has become synonymous, really, with ISIS. You see Sotloff there kneeling, wearing the orange jumpsuit, which is synonymous now with Guantanamo Bay, and then you see the executioner there at the right. I have to emphasize to people, having seen this video, that if the individual is Sotloff, he is under extreme duress. I cannot emphasize that enough, extreme duress, when he gives a statement denouncing American foreign policy. And then the executioner speaks briefly, but I would say more aggressively and directly to the president than in the last Foley video, where he just calls him Obama rather than President Obama, and says that it is the U.S. foreign policy which is to blame for Sotloff's death, which is clearly not the case, Shep.
And Catherine, in the end of this video, there is a threat, at least, to someone else.
Well, it's clearly implied at the end of the video. The individual believed to be Sotloff makes his statement, then the executioner makes his statement, and then they show what I would call the initial stages of the beheading. They cut away, and then they show the completed act. Then it goes to black and it comes back again with another individual who is kneeling on the ground in the orange jumpsuit, and this has been widely identified as a British hostage. And the executioner doesn't say he is next, but he says this is a warning to all nations who should join any coalition with the United States. So the selection of a British hostage as the next one who is their target does not seem to be any accident, Shep.
Catherine Herridge. We'll get back to Catherine as news develops.
Sure.
Catherine, thank you.
Yeah.
Of course, they do have that hostage. We don't know how many more hostages they have. We know that the British Parliament is about to consider new rules regarding these terrorists, and we'll get to all of that with a couple of experts. But first, I want to turn to Matthew Van Dyke, who's a filmmaker, friend of both Steven Sotloff and Jim Foley. Man, I am so sorry.
Thank you.
I don't know how you're dealing with this.
Yeah, it's difficult.
I mean, these guys they were tight friends of yours.
Yeah, I've lost 2 friends in 2 weeks.
How do you make sense of this? I mean, these guys were there to do just one thing, and that was tell a series of stories about a people who were being really ripped apart.
Right. They were just journalists doing their jobs, reporting. They had a passion for what they did. They knew the risks, but they kept going back because the story needed to be told, and now they've paid for it with their lives.
Steven Sotloff's story is new to many of our viewers because for many months, at the family's request and beyond, and organizations' request, there was no talking about this. The hope was maybe they'd be able to get him freed before anything bad could happen.
Right. In a lot of these cases, the family's chosen to keep it secret. That also applies to other hostages involved that are held by ISIS, including some Americans.
We don't really know how many there are, but we're led to believe there are as many as 20 being held by somebody out there. And then I guess there's the possibility that ISIS buys them up.
Yes, some of them are kidnapped by other groups and then sold to ISIS. Some of them are directly kidnapped by ISIS, but there are definitely other hostages, and there are indeed more Americans held hostage as well.
Was there any kind of communication? We know that with some hostages there was a ransom that was paid, not by the United States, but by other countries. Were there demands that you know of for ransom for Steven Sotloff?
I'm not sure if there were any demands or not in this case.
Yeah, it sounded as if, I mean, as unthinkable as it is, that they wanted to use these guys for these reasons. And a lot of analysts were actually suggesting the other day that maybe they were killed on the same day.
It could be. In the case of ISIS, they have a variety of sources of funding. They're not a group that relies only on ransom demands. So in some ways, they have a more diversified economy than a lot of countries in the region, with oil revenues and extortion and taxes. So in their case, ransom wasn't their highest priority with the American hostage.
And one other matter on that, Steven Sotloff in the video with Jim Foley had hair on his head. And in this video, he does not. Whether that suggests that it was done at another time or whatever, but you know, we do know that the British are now talking about putting more sanctions into place, making it more difficult for terrorists to move about. David Cameron's back, the first day of the British Parliament meeting again today. This is the first day after Labor Day for us. This group, with media and social media, is as good as anything we've ever seen. They
are. It's a whole different animal. They've taken terrorism to a whole new level, but eventually we'll win and we'll stop them.
How's his family, Steven's family?
Yeah, I'm sure they're devastated. I've talked to his sister recently, but I haven't talked to them since the news came out. I think it's better to give them some space.
Oh, agreed. I wondered with the video that Mrs. Sotloff put out just before we all went away for the holiday, it was difficult to watch a mom have to go through that. And he wondered at the time if anything like that would make any impression on anybody.
Not to these guys. These ISIS are heartless individuals. They've done a campaign of cruelty, not just against foreigners, but against the people who are living under their reign. Nothing's going to dissuade them, unfortunately.
What was Sotloff's passion?
He loved journalism. He loved the region. His real passion was the people, though. He was good at Arabic. He had spent time living in Libya. Actually, he was really somebody that connected with the people of the region.
When he was in Aleppo, he was trying to tell the story of this conflict and how it was affecting everyday people.
Yes, and he had done it before. He had been to Syria before. He had reported extensively in Libya. He was very good. He had written for Time magazine. He was a real professional, a really bright career ahead of him.
Any contact of any kind all along the way?
Not since he went missing. I had dinner with him in D.C. just a few weeks before he went to Syria. We had often talked about Syria, about the security situation, but he just vanished. And I heard about it from Syrian contacts, what had happened to him.
If they shut down journalism, we won't be able to know what's happening, and then we're in real trouble. Are your friends who travel these regions, are they still out there and doing good work, or has this put the fear into folks to where they really won't take the chances anymore?
Unfortunately, yes. A lot of journalists have stopped going. A lot of my friends have stopped going. Media organizations have stopped sending people. Freelancers are afraid to go. It has put a lot of squeeze on the press, and a lot of them just won't go anymore, and I don't blame them at all.
It wasn't that long ago that this sort of thing didn't happen, that there were unwritten rules. I mean, not that they hadn't happened throughout history, they had. But in this sort of way that we've seen from Reporters Without Borders and others over the past few years, this wasn't happening.
ISIS doesn't play by any rules. ISIS has kidnapped women and sold them as slaves in Iraq. ISIS beheads people routinely. Crucifies people that they disagree with. This is an organization that knows no limits, and they just need to be stopped.
You're doing something that would be hard for a lot of people to do, and that is going out on a pretty regular basis to just about anybody who'll listen to talk about your friends and what they've been through. Why are you doing that?
I want their memory to be preserved. I want their legacy to be preserved. I don't want them to be forgotten. They shouldn't be forgotten. The only reason that we know that anything bad is happening in Syria is because of people like James and Stephen. And what the work they do is very important, and people need to know about it, and people need to know what they gave their lives for.
Matthew Van Dyke, friend of both of them, thanks so much for coming.